morning, everyone. Ça va? Everybody doing well? Before I start, I just want to say I am not Will Smith. A small kid ran up to me on Sunday and was like, Will Smith! And I was like, cheeky. But thank you all for waking up early to come and see me. I know there are a lot of other talks happening right now, and you chose to spend your time with me, and I'm very grateful. And hopefully, when my talk is finished, you feel like you've made the right decision. So, my name is Mike, not Will. I am a producer at Us2 Games in London, and today I'm going to be just sharing some learnings and findings from developing our latest game, Desta, The Memories Between. So, first of all, a little bit about me. I'm going to start my timer so I don't run over. My name is Mike. I'm a producer at Us2 Games. I'm someone who doesn't take themselves very seriously. I work in the games industry, which should be fun. I find it strange that sometimes players seem to have more fun with the games we make than the developers have making the games, and I like to change that. So I do silly stuff. I jump on people's backs and I point at screens. My senior producer, John's looking very disapprovingly at me, but I just like games dev to be fun and just have a lot of good vibes. But when I'm in a more serious mode, I tend to be in charge of looking after teams. I want teams to work more efficiently. I like the idea of working smart, not hard. I also like the meme of I want games worse graphics with developers that get paid more money. That meme, I really resonate with that. And so I've been at Us2 Games for 10 and a half years now. I started out in QA and eventually moved into production around 2018. And a lot of my role, as I say, is about making teams work efficiently. I make sure we're working to schedules that will not kill us, making sure we don't run over budget, making sure everyone has enough tools that they need. Sometimes I just even need to remind my team to drink water. And when I'm not working, I like to try and give back in the industry. So every now and again, when I have some free time, I meet up with a group of people. Yes, I did Photoshop this picture because we've never actually been able to all meet together in the same place. But we're a group called POC and Play, and we basically just run a bunch of initiatives to try and help open the doors to games industry to people who otherwise haven't had access. So we just offer like networking events and portfolio reviews and just try and connect people because this industry is great. It's been great to me. It's got me here speaking to all of you, and I would just like to share that to everyone else. So let's get back to business. Over the 10 years I've spent at Us2 Games, we've made a bunch of games like the Monument Valley series. Does anyone recognize these? Has anyone played them? That's a big relief because I think the other games I'm going to show are a bit more obscure. So if you didn't know our most popular games, the chances of you knowing the other ones would be greatly reduced. But we've also worked on games like Assemble with Care, which came out on Apple Arcade in 2019. Alba, another Apple Arcade title, came out in 2020. This was my first project as producer. It was really good for me. And finally, Desta, The Memories Between, which is going to be the focus of my talk to you all today. This just came out last year on Netflix, so on Android and iOS, and came out in April this year on Switch and Steam. So let me try and summarize the game to you all so you know a bit about how it works. So Desta, The Memories Between is a character-driven, turn-based tactics game that has roguelike elements, centering around a metaphorical dodgeball-esque ball game, and it also has live updates, so it's also a bit of a games as a service thing. That might sound confusing, and when words fail me, I try and resort to other things. So I'm going to very quickly play you a gameplay trailer. I've already done a sound test, so it should work. I'm going to try and be helpful and maybe put the subtitles in French, because I think it'll be a bit quicker than that system. Okay, cool. Also, pro tip, if you have an hour to fill, it's good to play a video because it saves you some time.
I keep having the weirdest dreams about my hometown. I've not been back there in 2 years. Not since Dad's memorial. Now Mum's trying to sell the place. I can't find the words to reach her. Dad would know what to say. He used to have us throw this ball back and forth to work out our problems.
So you came back, Desta, after all this time?
You can't just show up and expect everything to be normal. I'm sorry. I should have kept in touch. I've imagined these conversations in my head 100 times. But I think I'm working my way through it.
Well, if it isn't Desta. Sleeping in class again.
Have I had it all wrong?
You look like you could use a friend right now.
I can't keep running. I've got to find the right words. All these dreams. Let's see how far they take us.
So that's Desta. So that was my attempt to... Thank you. It's also got a really, really good soundtrack. So the game in a nutshell, the idea is that Desta has moved away from home for 2 years since the passing of their father, and now they are heading back because their mum is selling the family home. And when Desta left, they kind of just left. They didn't talk to anyone, didn't say goodbye, and they sort of left all these relationships in really weird places. Now they're getting a bit worried, a bit anxious about returning back to their hometown and having to explain why you didn't reply to someone's text message, why you just left them on red. And they're getting a bit anxious about this. So when they fall asleep each night, which is how the sort of roguelike structure works, Desta falls into this dream world, which is populated by people from their memories and their subconscious. We were inspired by Inception with this aspect of the storyline. And while they're in this dream, they attempt to resolve their conflicts via a ball game. We're using this ball game as a metaphor for conversation. So when I throw the ball at your face, it's like I'm talking to you, and when you throw it in my face, you're saying your thing back and have an argument, and hopefully by the end of that, we resolve it and we're friends again. And if Desta's unable to resolve the conflict, they wake up, and then they can do the sleep again the next night. And that's the basic premise of the game, that's the loop. If it's still confusing, as I say, it's on Netflix, it's free. Please, well, free if you pay for your subscription. Please get it, and if you want to leave us 5 stars, I'll be very happy. Sorry, I had to say that as a mobile game developer. I always want as many reviews as possible. So for this talk today, I've split it into 2 sections. The first is going to be quite a short and sweet look at the more mechanical aspects of the game. And the second part, I'm going to do a bit of a deeper dive on the game narrative and how we developed and fleshed out the character of Desta, because they have a lot of interesting things going on with them, and there was a lot of room for us to make terrible mistakes. But I'll just show you how we did our best to avoid those. So straight into the game systems. There are 3 which I'll be talking to you today about. The first is this physics-based throwing system, which is like the second-to-second gameplay. Next is the roguelike framework of the game, which is the more meta-game, minute-to-minute, hour-to-hour gameplay where you're unlocking abilities and mastering skills and getting new teammates and just becoming better at the game. And the third part is live updates, which is just post-launch content, adding additional things and making the game last longer for players. So, first of all, we adopted a physics-based throwing approach. Now, at Us2 Games, one of our company values is to try and make what is exclusive inclusive. And so by that I mean we try and take traditional game genres that might be a bit intimidating for people to interact with and see if we can make them more appealing to like a mass or maybe more of a casual type audience. So we always wanted to make a tactical game, and we thought tactics games are very cool, but they can be quite intimidating with like there's a lot of numbers. Games like XCOM and Into the Breach maybe don't look as appealing to a casual player as they would to like your hardcore audience. But we thought, is there a way we could change the basic input mechanics of a tactical game to make it more fun? What would be something that would work well on mobile, which was our lead platform? And so we were inspired by games like Angry Birds. We thought maybe if we made it more of a playful, satisfying interaction, that would get people to engage with the game first, and then once we've got them in, we can gradually introduce these elements of tactics, and then maybe they find out, I like that, I would like to play something else, and then they move on and progress up to and Into the Breach, which is an amazing game and everyone should play. And so this was like the dream we had for this interaction method. The next slide, this is not in-game footage, clearly, but this was an unexpected mistake we made when developing the physics-based throwing system. So we found out that there was a way for whenever you took a throw, you could just throw it in a particular way where it would always like magically land back in your hand, and then you could throw it again. And I think it's because we use Unity and it was a deterministic physics engine, so it was very easy to predict exactly where your shots would end up. And this meant that players found this as a dominant strategy. You could throw a ball in an enemy's face, catch it, throw it again, catch it. And now you also have possession of the ball, meaning the enemy couldn't throw back at you, and you could just repeat this. There was no need to even engage with any of the abilities or any tactics at all. And so we were like, this isn't great. We need to get people to engage with the tactics again. And so we decided to address this by adding a slight element of randomness. So here is what it looks like in the game when you're taking a shot. If you'll see here, those sort of stack of wooden planks is where it's going to hit. Anything beyond that will sort of fly out in a slightly random way. It's not completely perfect, but it just about works. It's just accurate enough that shows like you know what your first shot is going to do, but not the second one. And because we set the game in a dream, we kind of get away with adding a bit of randomness because we can always explain anything as, oh, it's a dream. You know, sometimes the ball will bounce back in your face. It's fine. And that's sort of how we address this problem. Next, I'm going to talk about the roguelike framework. So as a company, again, one of the biggest criticisms of our work, and with all the games I showed you at the beginning, everyone just says, your games are too short, we want more, how do we get more game from you? Like, I finished Monument Valley, and then I kind of don't need to play it again. I would like more of your games. And so we thought, okay, maybe we can build this roguelike structure. Maybe this is the perfect vehicle through which we can give people more game. It's exactly what they want. We were listening to the customer. Customer is always right. And so we built this system where, you know, Desta has these same dreams every night, and they go through, and we thought, this would be a really great way to deliver this. This is exactly what we need to do. That was the dream. The reality of when we did implement this and release the game is that players really hated this. Simply put, they thought it was actually a good game, but they thought this one aspect of the game basically made it unplayable. It was just, you felt like you were being really heavily punished for like making a small mistake. You had to now start from the very beginning, do everything again, and it just sucked. Part of the reason for that is that we didn't build enough content, and I think when you're building a roguelike, you kind of need a lot of content to make it feel like each time you play, you're having a different experience. Sadly for us, we couldn't, even though we randomized the levels that you would load into, the enemies on those levels, the abilities that were like drawn from the pool that were given to you, it just didn't really come across to players, and basically a lot of people just gave up playing the game. So we tried to address this as best we could. After the game launched, we updated it to include this shortcut system, basically just some simple checkpoints. If you made it to chapter 2 and then died, next time you played, you'd be presented with your subconscious representation of yourself would say, hey, do you want to go back to where we just were? Or would you like to maybe have some bonus power and start again from the beginning, but I'll give you like 1 extra hit point for the remainder of your run. I'll give you like 1 extra ability point on your first turn every time. And it was a pretty decent compromise. We did find with the statistics of the game that we got players playing further into the game after this update, which was good, but something to keep in mind, I guess. Like if you want to do a roguelike, you need to make content, I guess, in a cheap way where you can have loads and loads of it so it feels like a different experience each time. And then live updates. So this, again, like with the previous point, we were just trying to give the players what they wanted. They wanted more from us, and we said, well, we're going to give you more. So once you beat the game, you unlock these challenges. And so once you beat the game, you could play the first challenge, and then every 2 weeks, we will release a new challenge level. Sometimes we will release new abilities, which will be added into the game. We would unlock new characters, a VO, which you could then play with when you played the main storyline, and a bunch of other stuff. That was the dream. But the reality of it was, combined with the previous problem of people dropping off because of the roguelike structure, this was what the home screen looked like for most of our players. That challenges option was grayed out because people weren't enjoying the game enough to finish it, and therefore they couldn't access these challenge modes. So then that sort of made us go against our principle of making something for everyone. We were now only making content for like this tiny like upper echelon of Desta players who had actually beaten the game. So to address this again, we just figured, okay, we want people to play the game. We added a bunch of difficulty options along with that shortcut system you saw before. So these vary from just small things that will make the game a bit easier, a bit more enjoyable. My personal favorite one is opponent accuracy. You can make the enemies just a little bit off, so they'll just like, we call it the stormtrooper aim from Star Wars. Like they'll never really hit you, but they'll always come quite close. And there's also at the bottom there just straight up no fail mode. Like you could just never die. You can just go through the game and play it all. And it's good. It helped us a lot, and we were able to see more people unlock challenge mode. But I think we made a mistake in releasing this update a bit late. We kind of did the content first, and then we realized, oh no one's enjoying the content, and did this. So I would just say, if you're going to make a live game, like it's cool to have like a backlog of things you'd like to work on, but prioritize that based on the data you get from your players, and don't just like run headfirst in it. You don't necessarily have to trust your instincts. You can kind of let the players decide. So just going to quickly wrap up this section because the other section is much bigger. Take these home with you maybe. First thing is like make sure your game systems actually work together with each other and not against each other. We had a sort of weird friction between our physics-based system and the fact we wanted the game to be played in a tactical way, because if you are throwing the ball and you don't know where it's going to end up, how far can you actually plan your moves? Because you kind of just like, I'm going to throw it as hard as I can, and if it lands at this teammate's feet, then I'll do this, but if not, I need to do a different thing. Also, following that same vein, the roguelike system probably wasn't the best way for us to deliver the narrative and the story that we wanted to do. The story we tell is pretty linear, and maybe a roguelike just wasn't the correct vehicle to deliver that to people. And then just another bit on the live update stuff, just like leave some time for data gathering and like reflecting on the product before you just rush out and do stuff. Like take some time, gather some data, gather some metrics, see where we always refer to things as the squeaky wheel, find what the squeaky wheels are and then put the oil there. We kind of just put oil on random stuff that was already working quite well. And now I'm going to quickly have a sip of water, and then I'm going to move on to this sort of narrative adventure that we're going to go on. So I'm going to be covering a bunch of things about inclusion and diversity and narrative, and before I do that, let's take a look at Desta. Like, what does Desta look like, the character? So this is like just the evolution of Desta as a character, like as a visual, as like a game asset, I guess. Starts in 2020, where Desta was very cute and very chibi, and then like third from the left is maybe my favorite one on the top row, because it's like very abstract and very much like, I think Chris, our lead artist, was inspired by Steven Universe and the Crystal Gems, just going for these sort of like magical colors. And eventually we sort of grounded on something that felt a bit more realistic and normal. That's the final model we did in 2020. And so Desta's cool as a visual asset, but Desta, in my opinion, is even more cool as a person. When we developed this character, we somehow ended up giving them all of these different like memberships to underrepresented groups. So Desta as a person is someone who is non-binary. They are Mancunian, which is someone who's from Manchester in England. They are pansexual, and they're also Afro-Caribbean. And as a member of all these different groups, we found that Desta became like very intersectional. And we were thinking to ourselves, okay, now this is becoming a very specific person. Are we maybe running the risk of like making everyone who's a member of these groups offended if we get anything wrong in these things? And we were like, yeah, we probably are running a slight risk doing this, which may make you think to yourselves, why would you even create a character like this then? Because you could just go for a really easy, generic, safe character choice, everyone will like it, and just enjoy your game. And my answer to this question is simply just, why not? Because I feel like as devs, we always innovate in other ways. We innovate really heavily in terms of like art styles and graphics. We innovate a lot in mechanics and visuals. So I think we could just be innovating more in terms of the characters we create in our games as well. One of the values of our studio is also just trying to make games for everyone, and I think part of that also means people who've maybe not felt represented in games, like you can offer some representation to them. You could extend that like olive branch, extend that hand, get more people into games, and I believe that like having more people in games just means we'll have more games, and I think we'll probably also have cooler games. I think it'll just be great. I think it's just it's very moral and very like an honorable thing to try and do. But honor isn't enough. Like, you can't just say, I'm going to be like, I've got a moral high ground, I'm now going to just start telling someone's story. I can't just start telling a story of like women in India because I'm not a woman, I'm not from India. You need to make sure you make the right checks and balances when you do this sort of thing. So how do you do justice to all of these different elements of people? Or to be more specific, how do you do it when you are not from that group, when you don't have the experience of that? And to be honest, the answer to this question is really simple. You just ask, like you find people, you ask them. There's another step to asking though, which is paying. So basically there's a lot of consultants, you hire people to join your team, super easy. And so I'm just going to go through those 4 different facets of Desta as a character and sort of take you on these small adventures we went on trying to get each element right, starting with Desta as a non-binary person. So this was an area where we just basically had no lived experience on the team. We do have non-binary team members at Us 2 Games, but they weren't assigned to Desta on the project, and also Desta as the main character needed to be written properly, so we basically needed a writer. And so how do we find a writer? We ask. So our ask was for anyone who was a writer who could work on a non-binary main character story. There's 2 cool things I think we did with this job post. One is we made it remote, like fully remote. You could be anywhere globally and do this. Secondly, in that first paragraph, it says, maybe even in the games industry. So we were open to work with someone who was a writer, but from a different industry, TV, film, it would have been fine. The reason for this is simply, if you're asking for like a professional games writer who's non-binary and you want them to be like geographically close to you and you also like them and they like you and you want to work together, you're really making that pool smaller. So making things remote and making things open to other industries are just ways you can kind of make the pool bigger again so that you can get more people coming through. And so with this post out, we had a bunch of interviews, had a bunch of conversation with people, and then Ro joins the battle, and I'm referring to game dev as a battle because sometimes it is a bit intense, but this is Ro. They are a narrative designer who's worked at Telltale Games, Riot Games. They're currently the lead narrative designer at Sprocket Games based in California, and now we had an actual writer on the project. Up to this point, our game director, Danny, had been writing everything, but he's not a professional writer. He's also not non-binary, so he was writing everything through like a male lens like I would have been doing if I was doing it. So now we had someone on the team who could just go through everything with this like non-binary lens and make sure that the characters we were creating and the ways they were interacting weren't weird, we weren't using any strange stereotypes or dated language. And I'm not saying that Ro is representing all non-binary people, because everyone obviously in life has different experiences, but it's much better than having cis men writing non-binary characters. And so we collaborated a lot. This is a super duper zoomed out view of our Miro board. If you've not used Miro, you should absolutely use Miro. I think it's the best tool for like remote collaboration. I've zoomed out because it was hard to zoom in on a section without giving you loads of spoilers about the storyline. And again, you all promised to get the game and give me 5 stars. So I didn't want to do that and ruin it for you. But you could see something like we were discussing, what are the balls called? What are balls? Why are they called by the characters and stuff like that? So we did all these workshops and we were discussing how the characters interact with each other and what Desta's relationship is to all these different characters. And we basically came up with like a decent intent. We were like, okay, cool. As we went through this, we were like, these stories are quite normal, they're quite boring, they're quite plain, but they're very relatable. And so we were like, we had this intent of, we want Desta to just be a multifaceted person, like everyone on Earth, who just happens to be non-binary. Like, we didn't want to make it a big thing because ultimately it shouldn't be a big thing. Like, someone's non-binary, okay, cool. What else is going on with them, you know? So we thought this would be really cool. We thought this was like, again, like an honorable, noble endeavor. Let's just make a character who happens to be non-binary. Everyone will understand and we'll just continue and enjoy the game. But this led to a real problem of misgendering, because we were not actively reinforcing the fact that this character was non-binary. We found that everyone by default would say she, her. This would happen within the development team, and we had to always in meetings be like, raise hands, sorry, you said she, it's they. Or when we tested with user testers, we would tell them like, okay, this is Desta, they use they, them, and they would always say she and her. And even when we sent things to press would like be given a press release which clearly explicitly states that they're non-binary, and then they would put an article out that says like, Desta's new black woman as the main character of Us 2 Games, a new game. We were like having to reply to people, getting to change it, and it sucked. It really did suck. We were like, a lot of us had never experienced it because you call me a man, I'm like, yeah, I identify as a man, that's perfectly fine. But we had never experienced this on the team, and we thought, how can we subtly reinforce Desta's gender identity? It's not pivotal or crucial to the story, but it's important that they at least get this person's pronouns correct. So the way we addressed this was just adding pronouns on the dialogue screens. We just put pronouns for every character when they speak. It will say like he, him, they, them, she, her. Seemed like a pretty easy and effective solution. Some people on the internet were upset by this and called us, SJW, go woke, go broke, blah, blah, blah stuff. But we didn't care about them. We're not talking to them. We just put this in, and it was really cool, and we were sorted in English. But did you all know some languages are inherently gendered, and like things are just arbitrarily given like male or female. Like a door might be male in like Italian, but a speaker is female in Italian. It's like very odd. Not sure who decided this, but as part of our agreement with Netflix, we had 15 different languages we needed to support, and so we were like, we have no idea how to convey gender-neutral language in all these different languages. We need some help. We're going to ask for some help. We're going to pay people to help us, and so we got put in touch with a team at Keywords. Anyone know Keywords? If you make games, I think there's no way you don't use Keywords for some element of your development process, because they offer everything: QA, localization, community management, player support. And so they put us in touch with this like really good team. We requested specifically a team that had experience working with non-binary language, non-gendered language. And so this is a screenshot of the game in German and a screenshot of the game in Italian, where you can just see that they've applied the non-binary pronouns to Desta. I think if you look at the Italian one, it still comes across a bit feminine because it's persona non binaria, and I assume if it was like binario, it will become more masculine, but this language is constantly evolving. This was the standard at the time in 2022, but we'll see how it goes. But that's pretty cool. We now fixed it. We sort of were expressing the same information in English and all the different languages that we needed to support with the game. So we're like, cool, let's move on. But to be honest, we were left with something of an elephant in the room, because not too long ago I mentioned we wanted to just make Desta non-binary and not draw any attention to it. But now, due to like some stuff that happened in the real world, we felt like now we've actually experienced misgendering, it feels a bit weird to like pretend that like misgendering is not a thing. Maybe we should address it in the game. Like, we're not at a place yet where someone can just say, I'm non-binary, and everyone understands that you should refer to them as they. And so we figured, let's put this back in the story in some way. And so we wrote a character whose main conflict that Desta was going to resolve with them was just that this character was ignorant of Desta's gender identity. And so this character, we don't write them as some sort of evil monster. They're not like crazy far right. They're a normal person. Desta would consider them a friend. It's probably like, maybe you have people like this in your life who are like maybe family members who you love, but they're just like a bit behind in one area, and you're like, I love you, but why are you so dumb? Why are you so bad at this one thing? I wish you could understand. And that's the sort of character we wrote. So again, we want to keep everything relatable. We didn't want anything to be like too extreme. We're not being like super preachy in any way with this game. We're trying our best not to. But we knew adding something like this could be quite on the nose, especially if we're trying to like appeal to people who are non-binary. We would like them to play the game, but this could be a bit triggering. So we added a simple content warning, basically just letting you know, heads up, when you start this chapter, it says, hey, this chapter is going to contain misgendering. Are you cool with that? You can continue with the original lines. If you'd rather just avoid that, you can press alternative and just enjoy the game as everyone else does. And with that, we kind of went on a small adventure through like non-binary representation and sort of closed the loop on it. And so I'll move over to Desta as a character who's from Manchester, as a Mancunian. So our game director, Danny, happens to be from Manchester. That's not the reason why Desta is from Manchester. It didn't take much convincing for us as a group of leads to get on board with it, though, because we have a general feeling that any sort of like fictional media based in the UK is either very London, is very, all right, bruv, innit, bruv, Tuesday, bottle of water, like how I would talk, or it's very posh, Downton Abbey and Bridgerton, and there's not much like there's quite a lot of diversity in the UK, especially in terms of accents and culture, and you don't get to see certain types as much as others. And so we thought, let's set it in Manchester. That would be really cool. It helped because obviously Danny being from there meant he can put a lot of his like personal life experience into this work, and it just felt, as I say, more authentic as a result of it. And Danny was doing pretty well with the writing, but as I mentioned before when we hired Ro, Danny's not a writer, he's our game director, and he has a lot of responsibilities across like the visuals and the gameplay and the music and all aspects of the game. So we just needed to add more people who could help writing. So once again, we're going to ask for some help, we're going to pay someone for their help. And Jenny joins the battle. So this is Jenny Kong. Jenny is a writer, she's a director, she's worked at places like That Game Company on Sky, Children of the Light. She's really awesome. And she also happens to be from Cheshire, a borough called Cheshire in the UK, specifically a town called Warrington. And if you look at this map, Warrington's down there where Jenny's from, and Danny's from Manchester up there. So there's like geographically very close areas. And so adding Jenny to the team meant we had someone else with like lived experience of growing up in the same geographical area and sort of together with Danny, they were just sort of bumping heads and just working out what sort of slang might these kids use, what sort of things did you do when you were young, when you were the age of like Desta, would you hang out they would hang out in the woods and get drunk and stuff like this, and putting all this stuff into the game, and it just, again, more authentic, got the vibe down. This was real cool. Do you remember that we have to support 15 languages though? So we wrote these super regional, heavily like accented characters in English, and then we needed to like localize that into our different 15 languages. And so we just kept asking, making like these ridiculous requests to our translation team. We were like, is there a way to translate all these characters but keep them northern, like from the north of the UK? And so we asked, we made a specific request in Japanese. We said, could you write these characters as if they're from Osaka instead of from Tokyo? Would that be possible? So they all speak with Kansai Ben. They did that, and we got a tweet from one of our players in Japan, which basically says, I'm playing it with Japanese subs. I really love it, but please consider changing the subtitles from Kansai dialect to standard Japanese. Kansai dialect is common in Japan, but reading it in written words is very hard, especially for a person like me who's not from the Kansai area. And I think maybe our translators did too good a job. We didn't realize, I think this is just something that we were completely ignorant of. I guess the Kansai accent is much more regularly heard in Japan, but you don't read it. And I think maybe the equivalent for me in the UK would be like, if someone writes out phonetically how the Scottish accent sounds, I would have a really hard time reading that. So I think we've basically made the game very difficult to be played in Japan, and we do apologize. But good job to the translation team, because you really aced it. Next, moving on to Desta as a pansexual. And I think I'm going to have a quick sip of water, if you don't mind. Thank you. So this was just another one of those areas, like Desta as someone who's non-binary, where no one on the team had this lived experience. We needed help, asked for help, paid for help, and we got in touch with an organization called More Diverse Voices in London, and they basically view all types of media, film, TV, games, through this LGBTQ plus lens. And sort of they went through the whole storyline. We gave them access to the build, debug. They went through every storyline. They read, like, I think every piece of text in the game just to make sure we're, again, not using any weird dated language, any weird stereotypes or anything like that. And luckily, because of the approach we had given to developing this game and these characters, it was just like making them just regular people who just do regular stuff. They were like, you're doing this really well. You're just treating people like people, and that's exactly what you should do. This process also helped expand our knowledge in different areas, because we kept saying, Desta's non-binary, Desta's non-binary. And then they asked us, yeah, but what flavor of non-binary? And I didn't know at the time, but being non-binary is like an umbrella term, and it's like all these different flavors of being non-binary. And I was like, I had no idea. It turns out what we had in our minds for Desta was that they are agender. But there's also like demigirl, demi-boy, genderqueer, and a lot of times when you develop games, you kind of just learn more things about how to make games, but through this process, I learned something new, like about the world that I didn't know, which is pretty cool. And they also gave us a strategy for dealing with the inevitable trolls, people who are going to come out and say, oh, SJW, you got pronouns, this game is, you got gay characters, blah, blah, blah. And they gave us this really just concise, like, social media approach, which is effectively this, like, genuinely, like, you just ignore them. You don't engage with trolls. It's a waste of your time. That's exactly what they want. You don't give them what they want. You just engage with the people who are interested in you and just make them more excited about your product. So that was cool. Moving on to the final part, which is Desta as an Afro-Caribbean. This was really fun because this is where I could relate and put some of my lived experience in. My mum and dad, they were both born in Jamaica and moved to the UK like many decades ago now. Also, conveniently, Danny, our game director, his partner, her family are all from Guyana. And so we just spent a lot of time just talking about, like, what do you have in your house? Like, what sort of things? What's the vibe like in your house? Do you have flags everywhere? Do you have pepper sauce? Do you have butter, like cocoa butter? What sort of food do you have? And so we basically brainstormed a lot on ideas on, like, different items we could put in the game which would have some sort of significance to Desta. So there's a bunch of items called Memoria, and this is what the Memoria page looks like. So you can have an ability in the game and a Memoria, which basically provides you some sort of passive effect, some sort of buff. And these are all just items that have some sort of significance to Desta in the real, like in the waking world. And so we put in pepper sauce because we found that, like, all Caribbean families just have loads of pepper sauces in their house. And we put like the game effect at the top and like a little bit of flavor text at the bottom. Flavor, no pun intended with flavor text. But like you can just get this visual of like Desta's dad shaking the pepper sauce and it flying everywhere, going in his eyes and cool stuff like that. Another one of these items is cocoa butter. I don't know if you're Caribbean yourself or you have Caribbean friends, but you know we're very, very well moisturized. It's very important. This provides you with a shield in-game, and also the flavor text for this is explaining James, who is Desta's friend who always wears shorts, and the fact that he didn't even know about lotion until he met Desta and hung out with their family. So it just conjures this image of James with this like really horribly like ashy knees that look like he's been like kneeling in flour or something. It's pretty cool. We also discussed things like family dynamics. So one version of the story that was written had like basically the aim of the game is to resolve the conflict with your mum. And so you meet all your friends along the way, and then the final like climactic boss fight is with your mum, and you say the thing that's really on your mind. But at one point it was written in a way which was just like, if I say this to my Caribbean parent, I will never have a dream again. I will be killed. It's like you cannot speak to your Caribbean parent in this way. And so we toned it down and we got like a better vibe from like how the family dynamics would work. And yeah, even though I've described this as like a kind of linear line, obviously this is the way the slides have sort of laid it all out. This was a very chaotic period. Like we were sort of doing everything at once, and we were sort of like not sure if we would be able to land this plane properly. We did our best, and we sort of felt like we had a good basis for like this character. They felt real. They felt like a person who you might actually meet and interact with. And so we were like, okay, cool. Now it's time to find ourselves the voiceover artist who can like bring this character to life. We wanted to have full VO for this game for all the characters. And so we were like, yeah, let's go. Heads up, if you want to do something like this, you might find it really hard because we started to be so specific with the person that we wanted that it was like the voiceover casting company were like, we can't find someone who is like a professional voiceover artist but is also from Manchester, and they're also non-binary, and they're also from Manchester, and they also do this, and they're the right age, and they like your game, and they want to work on this project and stuff. Fortunately, we had the luxury of like enough time that we could leave the process up for a while. I know realistically I'm a producer, so I know you don't have unlimited money, you don't have unlimited time. So I guess if you're doing something like this and you start writing these super niche characters, just need to decide like what you're prepared to compromise on. Maybe you'd be like, sometimes you can go for like an older voiceover artist because they are capable of doing like younger people's voices, and maybe that's like the sort of trade-off that you'll be prepared to make. But we were lucky, we got the right person, and it was all good. Now for the other characters in the game, these are the friends, these are the allies who join your team, and you can form your team out of different combinations of them. They're all people who Desta knows in real life and in the game. Each person, based on like what their personality and characteristics are like, basically have different abilities. So you have James with his shorts and his overcoat. He's the one who wants to always go out and party. And so his ability allows him to teleport anywhere on the map at the cost of all of his ability points and cool stuff like that. And in this image, the art team will be really angry with me because I think I've got all the scaling wrong. I know Miss K is old and she's short, but I think I've made Fran too tall. But in any case, here you could just see people of like different ethnicities and ages and sexualities and religions and genders, and it's all cool. Like this is just how we see the world as a games company, and like it's what we want to put back into our games, just reflect like reality as much as we can. And again, even though there's all these things that make these people different from each other, the main focus in the game is simply what's their relationship to Desta, and that's the most important thing. So once we had all of these pieces in place, again, it was way more chaotic than I thought, and we were really unsure if like we had done enough in all of these different areas. It was time to test. And we built a version of the game which basically would allow you to start. You could go through the first like onboarding and tutorial section. You could then also play the first 3 bosses, I believe, and get your recruits on your team. And then anything beyond that was like placeholder levels. We had a quick debug button. You could skip ahead, and you could just basically keep skipping until you met like each friend, learn about the story with Desta, and like see how that story resolved. And we just asked a bunch of friends and family, other game devs. We asked like some press people to just have a go with this build, let us know what you thought. and give us feedback. And we got one piece of feedback, which was really, really, really nice, and I'm going to share it with you now. The question we asked was simply, who's your favorite character in the game, and why? And this is what that tester said. Desta. They are so beautiful, and their experience mirrors what I had to go through. I'm a queer immigrant person of color who had to deal with a complex family life and many phases of peer conflict. Though not one-to-one, Desta captures much of my lived experience very well, and with what feels like deep respect and care. Thank you. And so we were like, we felt like we nailed it, and like this is like just the piece that really struck us the most, because it was just like unbelievable that like we managed to sort of find like a real life Desta who played the game and was like, this is spot on, like thumbs up. But the other feedback we got was just like, these characters are all cool because we just kind of treated them like regular people. We avoided weird common tropes, stereotypes. We just treated everyone like normal people. And even though we did give them like, some membership to like underrepresented groups, it was fine. And so this felt really good. We were super happy with this. And with that, I just want to like send you off with some other thoughts, I guess. Like, please, can we all like just be as brave with like our characters and our stories as we are with the mechanics and art styles? Like, I know some things are obviously easier to like share on Twitter. I think like a cool art style or like a cool mechanic is like going to go wild. But I think we can also add more characters, because I think it's just going to result in like more people being interested in games. Oops, I shouldn't have done that. More people being interested in games and just cooler games coming out. And also, like, whenever you're in doubt, just ask someone who knows. There's going to be loads of people who know more than you about a specific thing. You can just ask, try and find them. If they join you, that's great, and you give them some money for their time and their services. And then, yeah, I think ultimately we are able to, like, give someone this gift of representation. Like, the first time someone sees themselves in a game could be, like, really pivotal for them. That might make them want to get into games, and they might become the next, like, Miyamoto? Kojima? I don't know who I want to decide, but they could become like the next big thing in games, basically. And it could be really cool. I've spoken a little bit faster than I was intending to, so there's more time for questions if you want. But thanks for listening. Here is a photo of me doing a pistol squat in the studio. That's it. Thank you, everybody. Merci. How did I manage it? How was it so quick? Not bad.
Hello.
Hi.
Hi. Thank you for the presentation. It was great. I have a question, but when you mentioned that maybe a roguelike was not the best way to best vehicle for the story, I'm not sure if you answered it already, but how did you solve that?
So basically, it was the, let me go back. Wait, I can just go straight to wherever I want, right? It was with us adding this, like the checkpoint system. We basically made the game function like as a traditional like linear game at that point. So you could like you didn't need to engage with the roguelike elements anymore. Which one? I think it's here. Yeah, this part. So we basically made the game like a traditional checkpointed linear story, so you could enjoy it like that. And if you wanted to continue playing it as a roguelike, you would always pick the option on the left and just start from the beginning.
And with the feedback you got from the players, did it work? Did they enjoy that way of playing?
Yeah, so we got a lot of like 1-star reviews on the App Store, but then basically once we made the update, we asked everyone, like, please update and let us know what you think, and a lot of those turned into 3. So it did move up, and then we also had like a bunch of analytics in the game. So we just saw, once the update came out, we just saw people's progression was getting further and further into the game. So we sort of had like some positives in terms of just like raw data.
All right, thanks a lot.
Thank you very much.
Hi.
Hello.
Thank you for the talk. Very interesting. I was wondering if you make the writers intervene in the same order you presented the talk. Like first the non-binary writer, then I forget the order, but like did they work together at the same time, or in that specific order you presented?
It was all happening at the same time. So we developed a team. At one point we had like Danny, the game director, Ro, and Jenny all working together, and just sharing ideas and collaborating all the time, because Ro, being from California, had a very different like upbringing, and so like they're very good at writing and understanding the non-binary stuff, but then a lot of collaboration was needed to try and translate that to this, as I say, very specific part of the UK. And like some of the words Ro would use, we were like, we don't say that in the UK, it's very American, and so we had to like do that. But yeah, it was very much everyone working together, sharing ideas. We would meet every week in the afternoon, because it was the morning for Ro in California, and yeah, just very, very, very collaborative process. Thank you, merci. You all got to. Everyone can go get some water. You can stretch your legs. It's fine. You can spend the next 5 minutes just downloading the game quickly and then give me like 5 stars.
Hi.
Hello.
Thanks for the talk, and I will definitely play the game. It looks nice. I have a bit of a maybe tricky question for you. So I'm wondering, how come did you ship without realizing that the game was too hard or too discouraging for people? What about, like, I don't know, playtesting and stuff like that before?
It's a good question. When we did the project post-mortem, it was something I myself raised. I was like, how come we never really addressed this problem very well before? And part of it was we just felt like we maybe probably didn't test on enough different people. We were like, I think we tested with a lot of friends who gave us maybe false positives. And every now and again, like 1 or 2 people would say, I don't really like this system. But we thought, we kind of made an assumption they would be in the minority. So I think the problem we had was just like, we didn't test with enough different types of people. We spent a lot of time on like people who kind of already like our game, so they're obviously going to give us like positive responses. But yeah, we messed up, I guess, in that small aspect. You learn, we're not perfect. If anything, I hope that through my talk I've shown that like we don't know all the answers. We're just working stuff out. We're doing the best we can. And in this occasion, we kind of, made a silly assumption that, the majority of like the good feedback would be like across the board. And right now the game's sort of like, if you get through that, people love the game, which is really cool. And I think we just had people who are more willing to push through the bad parts and enjoy the nice stuff. But yeah, ultimately, I think we just didn't test with a big enough, a more like realistic representation of the general gaming audience. Thank you. I got so quick.
Thank you for the presentation. It was really great. I was wondering if you encountered any conflict within the team when you created this very intricate character, and some people were not really on the same page as everyone for the diversity of representation.
Mm-hmm. It was largely okay. Something we decided to do with the game is in the credits, we put everyone on the development team's pronouns in the credits, and some people on the team opted to not have their pronouns on there because they weren't quite with it. But generally speaking, I think people were cool to build the game, but then like when it came like to like, I don't know, associating yourself in the credits with your pronouns, some people were like, I'd rather not do that. And to be honest, it's fine. I think we have to be inclusive, and like if someone doesn't want to put their pronouns, we can't force them. It's totally cool. And if people do, we support them. But as far as like the development of the character, I think everyone was just quite interested in the character, really, because it's just like, as I say, it's like not a typical game character that you run into. And so it was like new and fresh and exciting to work on, pretty much. But yeah, it's just the credits. Like some people just didn't want to put their pronouns next to their name in the credits, which is fine.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi. Here. Hi. Thank you so much for the presentation. I have a question related to the localization pipeline. Like, how did it happen? Simultaneously to the writing, piece by piece? after the end of the writing, like it's super interesting what you explain about the different issue about translating in different languages, and I'm super interested. Also, on how long did it take to actually iterate on it and have a result? Thank you.
Well, thank you for the question. Ideally, we would have finished the writing before we sent it to translation. Sadly, we were a bit... We made changes quite late. We kept changing things, which isn't the best way to be, because we annoyed the translation team. We were like, you know, I just sent you this translation. They're all out of date. Can you wait another day? And we didn't leave them the most time at all times, but generally speaking, we would sign off on a character and send them a batch at a time. We'd be like, here's the first batch of text. Please translate it. They send it back. I think normally it would take for the first batch, which had a lot of text, maybe 2 weeks for them to translate it all. Then we put it back in the game. Then we'd send it off to the localization, the LQA team, to check that everything worked in context. And because the translators just see the raw text files, but then the LQA team is playing it as a game and telling you, oh, you've used the wrong type of, you've used the wrong word here. This means this and that means that. And so it was bit by bit, but ideally we would have done it all in one, because that just makes everyone's life way easier. It made my life very difficult because I had a lot of time in spreadsheets copying individual strings that we had updated and changed. So yeah, it was piece by piece, but always try and do it all in one. Everyone will love you if you do that. Thank you.
Hello. Hello. Yeah. Hi, and thank you for that great game and for creating a great queer character too. Was it your partnership with Netflix that decided on 2D animation graphics, or was it a clear goal from the studio from the start?
That was it came from us. Originally, we basically pitched the idea to Netflix. So yeah, we always wanted to be like a 2D isometric tactics game. That was felt a bit familiar to Monument Valley-ish, I guess, with the isometric camera angles. And so yeah, we sent a pitch to Netflix, and they were interested in working with us. Netflix, other team, they helped us decide which languages to use, though. But it was they were not as strong a creative voice as you would maybe believe in, they were effectively a publisher, but they were quite happy to let us just make a cool game, and then they would just give feedback every milestone.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. We good? We good? Everybody ready for the next talk? I'm good. Thank you all again. I'm going to just put this picture because I'm so proud. I got this. Do you do Secret Santa? Is Secret Santa a thing in France? So I got this book on how to master the pistol squat, and I read it, and now I can do this. I'm not going to do it now because my legs are not warmed up, but it's cool. Good exercise. Well, thank you all.